I am Julia of Divine Realignment, and I am collaborating with my friend Jamie of Inspired by J. Marie. We have developed a program called Deep Timeline Healing, and this is the first of a three-part series where we are going to introduce you to the foundations of the program. It will be launching at the end of May, so keep an eye out for that. But today we are going to be talking to you about timeline healing and what it is and what it looks like. How about we just say a little something about ourselves beforehand? So, for
Okay.
me, I am a guide and a teacher, and I primarily work in the Akashic dimensions. So, to me, time is everywhere. It's primarily how I do my work, and I realign people to this current timeline. But you
Mhm.
work differently in the way that you move through energy. So, why don't you go over that for a second?
Yes. So, because I am a channel and I work really in channeling the energy, when I'm connecting with a person, the way that I see time open up are on almost cords of energy. And then I'm able to see that cord and open up that timeline of energy, which to me is just time. And I can connect into either their specific energetic field. Sometimes those cords are connected to ancestral ties, generational patterns. And that's really how I'm able to do some of this work. Because any bond of energy, which some people call time, is really going to connect into their field. And because I can see, hear, feel, and change energy intuitively as a channel, that's what I'm able to get into, to access, and to see. And I don't like to use the word manipulate, but it really is like this co-creative process with their higher self often and my higher self to change that energy.
Yeah, that's a really cool explanation. So, because I work in the Akash, and the Akash presents itself differently depending on how you do your work in it. But for
Mhm.
me, I see time rather physically. I see it in its context. I'll see like a time in history, or I will see a time in your history, or I will maybe even future time or things like that. And typically I interpret it as like a packet of information. Typically I get it
Mhm.
as a download. I'll see what it is that you're connecting into. So it's interesting from a human perspective, we think of time as completely linear. You go from A to B to C, one, two, three, but that's not at all what
Right.
time is. It's really concurrent. So I come from a point of singularity. And from that, it's like being on the center of a wheel, and time are the spokes that are coming out of it, or sort of like a spider in the center of a web.
Oh, yeah.
And so I see you, the person, the client that I'm working with, as the point of singularity, and then an unhelpful timeline, which is what we're going to be working with in clients, is something that is like an unhealthy bond, like you said, something that is stealing energy from you.
Hmm.
And so that is what is feeding into a negative pattern or a negative history that you keep repeating in this current
Yes.
time.
Yes. And what I love when we're working together is that because we're both seeing the same singularity point, but you're seeing it from that packet of information, that downloaded information, you get this visual picture. Whereas I'm looking at the same aspect. I see it very similarly where these lines are coming off of their energetic field, but I'm able to see the energy part and how that's affecting their energetic field, how they're able to move, their emotional bodies. And you're getting the logical or the analytical part of that, the words, the information, whereas I'm able to see and move the energetic part of it, which is why I think it's such a powerful experience when we work together, because we're coming at it from different aspects, but into that same point of singularity to release everything that is contained in that unhealthy bond or in that unhealthy line that's affecting a client from moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess what
Mhm.
exactly is a timeline? So we've explained how we work in it, but if we were going to come up with a
Yes.
single definition of what a timeline is, I think that's kind
Hmm.
of hard to do because it depends on your perspective. But do you think we can distill it down to something it has in common with everything?
That is tough because
Eh,
there are so
Yeah.
many ways to describe it. I think the easiest way is to consider it from the aspect that we are ourselves in this lifetime, and there are other incarnations or other aspects of us that are working in parallel or in perpendicular timelines. There's all these different aspects of us occurring at the same time, even though we feel as though this is time. I think that you explain that with past lives, which is really sometimes what they're pulling on, is that we're pulling on that energy. So the timeline is the full picture of all of the aspects of ourselves. And we're looking at the one that is really wreaking havoc or is causing an energetic disruption to this particular lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I distilled that down.
Yeah. It's interesting because if you're coming from the perspective that time is concurrent, all things are happening now simultaneously. Yes. Things in the past are happening at the same time as now. Things in the future are happening now as well.
Yes.
I think from a human perspective, time is only understood from a linear perspective where it is from point A to point B. So I guess time is just a measurement of growth, isn't it? And then
yeah, well, yes, and it's, I mean, if you look at the definition of it, time doesn't exist until you add space and energy into it.
Yeah.
So time is not real until we add substance, we add space and energy to it. So a timeline is a cord of energy that we are giving substance to.
Yeah. It's how we notice change. And
Yes.
I think your timeline, and particularly how you might notice that you need timeline work, is that you don't notice yourself changing. You notice yourself being stuck. You notice yourself repeating the same thing over and over again. It's like you're being stuck in a loop. And so it's almost as if, not as if you're existing outside of time, because that's rather healthy and that's oneness, but as if you are fighting time in a way, and you're trying to resist moving forward, or not even necessarily moving forward, but moving cyclically, even in a healthy way, like nature does. And so if you find yourself stuck in this, you can be like, oh, maybe I have an issue that I am refusing to put down. Is there something that I'm refusing to let go of? And so I just keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. And so I think what exactly is the timelines may be a trick question, because I don't really think.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's the way that I have seen these, you call them a loop. I actually see them as almost like a block. So if you're on this timeline of now, and there seems to be like another insertion point, that's that timeline that's unhealthy, could be parallel, it could be past life, and it's coming down and it's inserting. And so perhaps you are doing the inner work, you've done your shadow work, you think you've gotten to the source of the problem or the issue. Maybe it's your anger, and so I've done all of these things to deal with this, and then you come to that cycle again in your timeline, and you bump up against that. And that loop that you're talking about, I actually see it as a wave of energy, and it ends up pushing somebody back. And then so they just keep bumping into that thing. So when we're talking about timeline healing, it's really removing what people would probably call blocks. And that's why they get stagnant and they feel stuck, because energetically they are. Yeah. They kind of are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the way that I would see something like that from an Akashic perspective is I typically see people working out a problem and an issue that they have for themselves, and because they perhaps lack perspective on it, or they lack validation, or they need it for some reason. Maybe they need to feel angry, or maybe they need to feel justified in some way. And what they do is they pull from a similar experience from either a parallel life, a concurrent life, or an ancestral tie. And they repeat that in this current incarnation. I view that in my work as a pain point of connection there. And it's something that you can use to gain perspective on an issue. But if you're coming at it from a point of just being so stuck and focused on yourself, that's hard to realize and pay attention to. And that happens to the best of us.
Yes.
And so it helps to have people who can help you step out a little bit and be like, oh, do you see how this might not be yours?
Yeah.
And then so that might be easy to let go of as soon as
Hmm.
we unidentify with it and let that
Absolutely.
go where it belongs.
Yes.
And so that is how I see it akashically. I sort of see you reading somebody else's story and thinking that it's your
Mm,
own.
yeah.
That's how I see it.
I love that. And that really makes sense for me personally when I have done my own really kind of deep timeline healing for myself in session. I want to say that I think that affirming that outside perspective is really helpful, because the timeline healing that has been the most revelationary, I might have just made up that word, revelationary for me, it has been in the presence of someone who is holding the space and is helping to direct what the process that I'm personally going through. And ancestrally, it was this idea of poverty. It was the idea of having to suffer. It was the idea of like abandonment and loss, which I was trying to work out in this timeline for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was creating a lot of chaos as I continued to try and pull at this and pull at this, when really, like you said, it wasn't my story. It was something that had been carried over. And once that awareness happened, once that consciousness came in, because I had somebody else holding space and working with the energy with me, I was really able to release that and bring that healing to that ancestral line that was asking for it. But they weren't asking me to work it out in my life. They were just asking me to look at that time and give it the love and give it the attention that it was asking for.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was able to release from me. And why I think is important that we're calling this deep timeline healing is because it really has a profound effect then, as we're talking about that movement forward, that growth, right? Because then I'm no longer feeling stifled and as though I have to keep myself contained inside of this suffering or this loss aspect. Then I'm able to continue that growth that was meant for this lifetime. Because when we talk about generational or ancestral healing specifically, and you hear that you're healing 7 generations back and you're healing 7 generations forward, the only way that you are able to accomplish that growth or that healing forward is if you're no longer attached to the old way. You have to break that chain. So if we want to distill it down, then maybe that's what timeline healing is in regards to specifically ancestral or generational or these habitual things that show up in families. We're breaking that chain, and the chain that we're breaking is that timeline that is no longer needed for this life or for this family.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I agree. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
deep because it's so entrenched in your psyche or maybe your energy field or your story.
Yes.
Like you fully believe
Hmm.
it. It's not something you even question. It's
Yes.
just we just jump over it during the day, and that's just where
Hmm.
that's always been. It's where it always belongs. We just move our life around it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's oftentimes things that we don't necessarily see. We notice the pain,
Hmm.
right? We notice the
Yes.
frustration. But
Right.
again, that's just life, right? The pain and the
Hmm.
frustration, the anger, the sorrow, that's just how it is. And anytime you find yourself saying something like that, it's a moment to bring consciousness to it and be like, does it have to be that way though? And
Hmm.
bringing those eyes to it, I think, can be tricky. It's possible to do it on your own, absolutely. But it's
Hmm.
easier if you have people who are willing to hold the space for you to see it.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, I can see it for you all day, but if you don't see it, it doesn't matter,
Absolutely.
you know? And
Well, and having the awareness of what is the source of this? Where's the root of this actually coming from?
Mhm.
Because like you said, when you're so close to it, when you're living it every day, you have lots of ideas about what it might be. It could be your neighbor is causing this pain, or it's men, because it's always relationships. And so it must just be that I have bad taste in men, or I must be bad with money. That's why I continue to be in poverty, or I don't work hard enough. It could be any of these things.
Mhm.
But because you're able to access the Akash, you can say, no, this is actually where I see the root of this.
Mhm.
And energetically, this is where I see the root of it. And I think that is what's so powerful, is because the people who are going to understand this work and be called to do this kind of work have already been doing so much on their own.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where you're like, okay, I have done all of the tips, I've done all the tricks, my chakras are good, I know how to meditate, I've done some shadow work, I journal, I gratitude, I pray, and still there feels as though there's something that is catching my foot when I try to move forward. And a lot of time it's these timelines.
Yeah. And what I
Mhm.
particularly think is really interesting, and how our work overlaps. And so I view what I call soul blueprints. Basically, it's just like the
Mhm.
template, the energetic
Yeah.
template of who you are. And
Yeah.
I would call that a false overlay. So everyone has a specific sacred geometry of who they are.
Mhm.
And when it is in alignment, it feels yummy, it's in flow, it's delicious, it's divine. But when all of a sudden you're taking somebody else's information, their own grid, and you're trying to glom it onto yours, things get
Yes.
staticky. And all of a sudden,
Mhm.
there are all these mismatches, and life gets hard. And that
Mhm.
is how I would see that. That's how it actually feels uncomfortable when I'm in someone
Mhm.
else's blueprint and I'm like, ooh, that's not right. Something is not flowing. And that's what that is, because you're living somebody else's
Mhm.
story. And it wasn't even right for them. No one is meant to
Right.
live in poverty and distress and discord and anything
Correct.
like that. And so it's actually, when you deal with things on this level, not only are you helping liberate yourself from it, but you're also helping liberate humanity in general from the same issue, because you're loosening the hold and the attachment that humanity at large has to it just by you letting go of it. And whoever
Mhm.
you've been reading their story and taking it as your own, you're sort of validating that perspective in a way, because you're saying, God, me too, right? Like, that
Right.
sucks. And they're like,
Mhm.
yeah, that sucks. And so they, in their timeline, are like, I can't believe it. And you here are like, gosh darn it. And so you're sort of like feeding into each other in that way. But when
Mhm.
you break the chain and you're like, I
Yeah.
don't want to live like this, man. This sucks, actually. And I am done.
Right.
And I'm not just going to be like, yeah, life sucks. I'm tough. Like, no one needs to be tough. Like, you don't have to
Right.
be. It's time to let go of that. You actually giving that other person, your ancestors, that other life that you think is you in that other time,
Mhm.
to be like, you know what? That is bullshit, isn't it? And they might have the opportunity to let it go in their time. And I think that this is what's mind bending about timeline healing, is that we actually,
Mhm.
when you stop viewing time so strictly as linear, it
Yeah.
actually has the opportunity to shift events in time.
It does. And I love what you said about, first of all, I think it's really cool that we both see that sacred geometry, that blueprint, because it is something that I see when I do activations. I call it gridding them. I grid them into their consciousness, and I see it as a sacred geometric pattern, and it lights up, and I begin to feel that flow that you're talking about. And it does feel yummy. It feels good. It
Yeah.
feels like bliss and happy, because
Mm-hmm.
they're in their divinity, right? Which is why you call it a divine blueprint. They're in their divinity. And the part of actually helping humanity energetically is, once somebody's blueprint is activated and they're flowing in that, it actually means that then they're holding up their part of that grid that is kind of gathered around earth, because we all are called to be our full essence. That's what ascension to me is. It isn't necessarily that you're going to be Buddha and have enlightenment and go sit on the top of a mountain. If that's what you would like to do, good job. I'm very happy for you that you have found your divinity. But for some people, it's simply being the light that shines as the person they're meant to be. And that's what you do. You tell them, this is the spark. This is that divinity that you're supposed to be as. And once they do that, it's like they light up. I always picture it like a net of each person holding up their part of the grid. And so that's why I think this work is so important. It's not just for yourself, it's not just for your ancestry. It is really work that you're doing for all of humanity, because we're only as strong as our weakest link, right? And so if we're all gathering and clearing this and tapping into that blueprint of why we're here now and being present with that, then we are creating an even more powerful energetic grid for humanity, for Earth, so that we can continue to bring that energy that is really so necessary right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's go time right now.
It is. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. And I take somewhat of an issue when people are talking about, oh, we're finally in the Aquarius, we're in 5D. And I'm like, but what do you think that means? Like, do you just think your
Right.
surroundings change and everything is different and all of a sudden it's love and
Right.
light? But it's like, you got to do the work. Like, all of a sudden, you don't just wake up in the Aquarian
Yeah.
age one day.
Yes.
Like, it
And we're
calls
at the
to you.
beginning of it. We're at the
Exactly.
beginning of it. Talk to me in 10 years about where we're at
Mm-hmm.
in the Aquarian age. I'd be much more excited about what that's going to look like. I mean, right now we're in the gritty, like the demo, right? We're in the demo
Yeah, it's the
process
beta
of
version. Yeah.
renovating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost as if all the time before was just a notification of the coming update. And so now we're trying to work out the kinks. And it's the time now to grid what we would like that to be into existence. And I think that this is the perspective that I personally know that I would like to change, the idea that things happen to us. The Aquarian
Yes,
age is upon us rather than something that we are creating. Like, that doesn't
correct.
just happen to us. This is something
Hmm.
that we work towards, and this is part of that work. We have to create
Yes.
it. And it's
Yeah.
time. Like, people are
Hmm.
feeling that call within themselves to be like, I'm done. I want something
Hmm.
different. You see it
Yeah,
everywhere right now, literally
you do.
everywhere.
Yes, you're creating your own reality. People, especially young people, are
Yes.
talking about manifestation and awareness, which is amazing. I love to see it becoming so culturally ingrained or culturally acceptable to be spiritual and to begin to use these ideas that we know to be true. Things like, have you heard of quantum jumping or timeline jumping? Or taking little quantum leaps. I mean, the person that I started to receive information about that was someone who was like 22 on TikTok. And it just blew my mind. I mean, the quantum leaping I had heard of before in different spiritual readings, and I don't know that I fully understood it until I began to understand time in the way that we're talking about today. But it was just so interesting to see that these young people are coming in already with these packets of information, already having this wisdom sort of ingrained, and they're having a much easier time of remembering
Mm-hmm.
their soul and remembering how to work with what really we're fundamentally talking about is a law of the universe. The timeline healing gets down to the law of resonance. It gets down to the law of creation. It gets down to the law of like reciprocity and energetic exchange. And I just think it's just really beautiful. And you're right, the Aquarian age is, how are we going to create the life and the world and the type of humanity that we desire?
Yeah.
And doing and having the understanding and doing the work like this that's so deep is really integral to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
as far as timelines go, the way that I feel into it, is there are so many amazing, fulfilling, divinely inspired timelines that are we have available to us right now. We can
Mhm.
actually, it's not, we're not destined for doom and failure. It may
Correct.
feel like it, but we, if particularly if we start taking responsibility in this very moment for this, we can create such amazing things. And sometimes it's
Yes.
easier to think of it as this is already something that exists because time's
Mhm.
happening concurrently. So it's
Correct.
a moment of being someone who would accept that for themselves
Hmm.
rather than someone who is so used to accepting less than.
Yes.
And that's what this work does. We say, notice the less than, and now be willing to welcome in something that you actually want and would enjoy. And it may have sounded a little weird when what I said a few moments ago about actually changing events of the past.
Mm.
I just want to touch on how that may be viewed currently in our present.
Right. Hmm.
We're constantly rewriting history as we learn more about it. We're
Yes.
always thinking, I mean, we're learning new things about Vikings, we're learning new things about like what happened in South America. Were there so
Hmm.
many, sacrifices? Were there really? We're
Right.
constantly questioning ourselves, and that is how that shows up. We
Hmm.
discover something new. We discover a new perspective. Maybe these
Hmm.
people weren't as stupid as we thought.
Yeah.
I mean, we keep finding that there were so many different species of humanoids on the planet at the same time. I mean, it wasn't just Homo sapiens. We also had the Neanderthals and the Denisovians. I think I can never pronounce their
Hmm.
name right, but I think there's at
Yeah.
least 7 that we know of,
Right.
and we just keep learning more. And as we keep liberating ourselves in the present, we're going to be able to learn more about the past in a way
Hmm.
that isn't so that gives our current reality a history of trauma.
Hmm.
Because when we live from that perspective in the present, we think, in particular, root chakra wounding. Life is so
Hmm.
hard. People had to struggle so hard. And so
Hmm.
when we lose the comforts, I guess, of modern life and we think, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive?
Hmm.
How can I support myself? Well, they used to live in harmony with the earth. And so it's
Right.
possible. It exists. I'm not wishing homelessness on anyone by any means, but I'm just saying that maybe we can create a new perspective on
Right.
what it means to exist on this planet. Because the way that we're
Hmm.
doing it now, this is the reason why we all have root chakra wounding. It's because we're
Hmm.
killing our home, right?
Yes.
In order to
Hmm.
live in it. So the more that we
Hmm.
do this deep timeline healing and the more that we get into that wounding, like the core unsafeness in any part of ourselves. It could be in our hearts or in our minds or any place that we feel like we're not supported or as if we're being failed by the universe in some way. Like, this is how
Hmm.
we liberate not just ourselves and not even just our ancestors, but other people who are not even connected to us besides these points of wounding. Like, it's going to sound grandiose and ridiculous, but it's the opportunity to like liberate the rest of the universe, really, in the multiverse when you get down to it.
Well, and I don't know that it does sound grandiose. I have had direct experience with that in meditative journeys and my own timeline healing that I've done in the presence of guides is a lot of the root chakra wounding, a lot of the trauma that is ancestral and generational is also connected to humanity and the way that you're talking about, because there was a there are a few particular points in time, of course, as we talk about history, where humanity was disconnected from that harmony of working in conjunction with nature. The Industrial Revolution, the colonization of the Americas and Canada, those are particular points in what I would call humanity's timeline in which the chain was broken in the other way. The chain, we were disconnected from what's really an integral part of our energetic field. And so when we're talking, because of course I see things in terms of energy, when we do that healing, it's not so grandiose to think that as we connect those pieces back, as we heal that timeline or we disconnect from the trauma of it and we say, I see you, I love you, we're here now. What happens is, instead of that root feeling disempowered and that root feeling so wounded and hurt, and it wants to be angry and it wants to outrage and it wants to cause more pain because it's felt pain, what happens is it begins to feel empowered. It begins to feel fierce and ready to do the work to be safe. but in a compassionate and connected way. And I think that you're seeing that outplayed right now in the way that you're talking about. You see indigenous cultures taking back their power, claiming their rights and saying, yes, this is the history. However, now we're standing up and we're saying no more, because that's what this healing does. That's what you're talking about. When we're clearing this particular point in time and people begin to do the work, you see that energy begin to accelerate into these cultures, into these generations, which is why I think we see it in those younger generations now, because so much of us have already done that work. I don't know if you want to call it the way showers or the 3 waves of volunteers, etc. So much of this work has already been uncovered and healed that now it's almost as if with that Aquarian age, you're talking about it not happening to us, but the opportunity there is to continue it, to really tip it over and say, yeah, we have this momentum going. Let's not stop. Let's go even deeper and see what is possible, because we've already seen so much is. Now we can continue to do that. And what I love about when you do this timeline healing, just speaking on a personal level, is that then you begin to see the part that you play in that, not only for yourself and your family, but yeah, for humanity. Some people are activists. Some people are just meant to go out and shine and be that like calming, nurturing balm that they bring to people. Some of us are meant to be voices and say, hey, we see these layers. You see the Akash, you see how this is working. I see the energy, and it's to be able to bring it down and make it grounded and to actually integrate it into their daily life. And then you begin to see the awareness. You begin to see the outpicturing in your life of how this actually looks. And I've seen it personally in myself. I've seen it in friends, and I have seen those ripples of healing that I have done, sitting in my bathtub, angels talking to me, feeling a little bit crazy. But then the next day you wake up and you hear how the Keystone Pipeline was shut down. And that's a victory. That's a victory. And you have to believe that the work that you're doing is actually affecting that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is perhaps the key point, is grounding this work, because
Yes.
that's how you see the effects of it. And that
Mhm.
is how you validate yourself. And the
Yes.
grounding of it, you're divine regardless of whether or not you acknowledge it. But the
Mhm.
grounding of this work into your energy and into the energy field of the earth is how you start
Mhm.
consciously accepting it and start
Yes.
making the biggest impact, the
Mhm.
most change. And
Yeah.
it gets to the point of grandiosity that we were talking about before. Like, this may seem grandiose. It is and it isn't, right? It
Right.
isn't because it's achievable and it's doable and anyone can do this. And it
Absolutely.
is because it's achievable and you can actually affect this type of change in a
Mhm.
big way. Not just
Absolutely.
in a like, oops, I knocked over my teacup and no, like, oops, I knocked over the bucket of generational wounding I was holding on to, and now I've cleaned
Yes.
everything. And look at this. Isn't
Yeah.
it great? Let's do
Yeah.
something new. It's
Mhm.
that big and it's that normal, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah. And
And
I think it can be both. And that's what's important to remember is both can be true. It
yeah.
can be simple and affect your daily life in the way that emotionally you feel more content and you feel more at ease and you feel more gratitude. And it can also, yes, have the profound impact of, wow, now my family is getting along more, or now I have more opportunities and blessings coming to me, or any of that, those out picturings like you're talking about. And when I say out picturing, that's what I mean, that grounded, this is actually happening in my life. This is the physicality of that energetic, Akashic, all of that work that seems very sort of woo and etheric, and I don't fully understand. But then when you bring it down and you begin to pay attention, you see the groundedness of it in your life. You see the integration happening. But it does still require work. It still requires awareness. It's not a click of the thumb. The opportunity is there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Again, both things are true, that this can be available for you. You can partake in this but you still have to do the work in order to bring it fully down into your life.
Yeah.
And begin to make new choices.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's the thing that people get hung up on is they're like, I'm doing the work, I'm not seeing results.
Right.
And I would say in large part it's because you may be doing the work, but you may be afraid of the results. And
Yes.
so you're perhaps not fully integrating and perhaps maybe not fully grounding. And I think that little nugget of fear is what most people don't want to engage with. Who would? It sucks. It doesn't feel good,
Yeah,
right?
it does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not fun. And
Mhm.
that's okay that it's not fun. And it's okay that it
Yes.
sucks, right? But sometimes in those moments, you need someone to hold that fear and tell you and it that it's going to be okay and
Yeah.
that it's okay that it exists and it doesn't need to change. And without that sort of influence and without kind of like grounding the experience, and I mean, when we're talking about fear, like that's the totality of God, like that's the totality of divinity. Like it's not all just love and light, it's
Exactly.
everything, it's all of the
Exactly.
experiences. And I think that that is also a large part of timeline healing, and in particular, why it can be so hard to do all by yourself without a lot of training and without a lot of dedicated practice. And it's
Yeah.
easy to get discouraged because you're just like, where does it end? Where does it stop? Right?
Exactly.
And that fear is another loop that you can be creating or another block, as you might see
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Right.
And I think it does also get back to how timeline healing, as you said it, like a timeline is just, it's resonance work. Like you're dealing with resonance. I'm just getting this image of like tin can telephones, you know, from like window to window. When you pick up one end, somebody picks up on the other, and you have to be like, well, what do we want to be vibing to?
Yeah.
Right? Because timelines, the way we've been talking about it, it does seem sort of fear based and a little doom and gloom, but you can actually connect with individuals and entities and beings in a positive way through timelines. Where you
Absolutely.
can say, I need a little support on this. Can I just, what are you doing? How are you doing it?
Yes.
And they can actually help you. It's actually, this may be hard to swallow for some people, but people who and work deeply with gods or what they might consider to be supreme beings and they channel, they're actually, that's what you're doing. They're
Yeah.
like, I'll show you how I'm doing it. And so maybe you can replicate that in your life. When
Yes.
you heal your own timeline and be yourself in your own timeline, you actually have the opportunity to sort of be that mentor in the way that gods and goddesses are to someone else. Because you're like, oh,
Absolutely.
that's easy. Let me show you. I'll show you how I stand up to my grandmother. Or I'll show you how
Yes.
I don't let people talk to me like that. Easy. I got you. Just look. Just watch.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's actually how I work with my higher self. That's the embodiment that I use with my higher self is, you know, there might be something I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about, or my ego is getting really loud about, how dare you think that you can do this? And my higher self will come in and be like, no, we have this. I have this. We're going to step in and you're going to feel the fullness of who we are in this moment, of who we can be. And that's the energy I pull on. And I think the example you were talking about in your personal timeline healing and how it can be so helpful and it doesn't all have to be doom and gloom is when I've done like my own childhood healing, which is really just another form of timeline healing. When you're talking about working with your inner child or your inner teenager, that's timeline healing because you're just working with this personal one.
An excellent example of how all time is concurrent. Because that
Exactly.
person still exists within you. You're the point of singularity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because time is fluid. And so I can go deep into meditation and I can speak with that inner child aspect and at whatever age. And the really cool part about it, the thing that gets me so excited and how I evidentially know that this works is that I have done work with, say, my 4-year-old aspect of self. And then I can remember, I have a memory, right, of being in that time or maybe 2 weeks after that. And I can hear myself as me now talking to myself. I can recall being 5 or 6 or 7 years old and hearing somebody say, you're strong, it's going to be okay. Like you're safe, it's fine. And that is me from the future talking to past me to give her encouragement, to give her love, to give her the nurturing that she didn't feel because maybe she was scared. And what that does when in this timeline, in this moment in time for present Jamie, we're going to say that, is then I can feel the energy of that love. No longer am I feeling tied to the fear that I had or anything. I'm feeling the nurturing that I got. And so it shifts the energy in that way so that no longer am I tied to the idea of abandonment or loss. I'm tied to the idea of, wow, somebody showed up for me.
Yeah.
I had that strength. And I pulled on that strength as past Jamie, not fully understanding. So how amazing would it be to tap into the full divinity of who you're supposed to be here now and allow that to be the momentum that carries you forward.
Yeah.
It's really powerful.
It's incredibly powerful. Yeah. That's like a mic drop kind of a moment. And I think people don't even necessarily realize that you can actually support yourself, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can go back and be like, "Oh, I got you. That thing you needed,
Yeah.
that hug you needed when you were like 12, I've got it for you right now." Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Or the strength you needed to stand up for that bully. And then
Mhm.
maybe you think about that instance and you're like, I don't even remember how it seems so out of character for me to stand up to that person and tell them no. Well, that's because 20 years in the future, you decided to go back and say, no, you're going to tell them no, we don't take that.
Yeah.
And it just changed that moment. It shifted that experience. I think a lot of times people think that inner voice or those things that happened are something outside of themselves. And it's really not. A lot of this is just time working in the spiral that it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this might be hard to like swallow. Like, how can I change my past? There's a lot of your past that you don't remember. For everyone. Some of it's boring. Some of it we didn't think was
Right.
important, or maybe we don't
Yeah,
need it until we need it, right?
exactly.
And so it's the more that you tell yourself it's impossible, right? The more you're going to be like, oh, this can't be done. But maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe I felt this little bit of support and maybe I just
Yeah.
brushed it off because I was like,
Right.
yeah, whatever. It's possible, it's real, it happens. What I love about this work that we're doing in particular is it does ground the experience and you are actually going to see changes in your life and you are
Yes.
actually going to feel better, different, do things you were afraid to do. You're going to see those changes because here's the thing is that you actually want it.
You do.
Yeah.
You
And it's
do.
not that either of us are convincing you that this is what should actually happen. This is you
No.
being like, I am done.
Yes.
Just, I am done. Like, someone just help me. Where are the scissors? Where I'm done, you
Exactly.
know?
I love that you said scissors because I just was reminded as a way for people to maybe have a deeper understanding of this as well is Dr. Wayne Dyer. Did I say his name correctly?
I think so.
He talks about pruning and he talks about how he would prune every night before he went to bed. And basically it's timeline work, but he would go throughout his day and he would shift the energy of anything that didn't feel good. So maybe he yelled in traffic and he would shift that and he would imagine that it had happened differently. He would speak to himself and then he would wake up and he would have the energy of however he had intended for his day to actually go is the what carried into the next day. And that's really what we're talking about is pruning, but we're talking about pruning these timelines that are either part of your family or are part of this, as you said, like multiverse, multi-dimensional timelines that are coming in and affecting things here because you're able to see into the Akash. And I have this crazy ability to see all energy that ties into people. So it can be very simple in that way. As simple as when I do pruning, it's often in conjunction with my kids. And so I kind of will prune their relationship with each other. And it is profound the way that they will get along in the next day or the day after.
Yeah.
And they'll begin to deepen their relationship in a way that isn't quite so adversarial.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
another excellent point, right? When you do this work, it's not the length of time that it takes. It's just it's
Mhm.
more or less that it's more gentle, right?
Yes.
Than trying to do a hard stop or trying to learn it through the school of hard knocks or anything like that.
Yes.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
support that goes into it, and it's allowed to be easy. Maybe it's better to say that you're allowed to be gentle with yourself while doing hard things.
Yes.
And when you don't have the kind of support that you need for that, and you're doing everything on your own,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
you're running house, you're running family, and now all of a sudden
Mhm.
you're running some type of energetic wounding that you're like, do I need one more thing? Like, it's hard to be
Mhm.
gentle with yourself throughout that process
Mhm.
while still being very honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And that, it's hard to look yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, like, no more. I love
Yeah.
you, but no more.
Yeah.
It's hard to hold on to that contradiction. But I think when you have people who are like willing to hold you and support you in it, particularly with you, because you're working
Mhm.
on the energetic side of it,
Right.
it's it's allowed to be easy and gentle. It's allowed to feel that
Yes.
way. Yeah.
It helps with the weeble wobble when you're having the support. Because if you think, even if you just think of being on a tightrope as that timeline, when you start disconnecting things, you are going to feel a little bit imbalanced as you're trying to adjust to the newness. And I think it can be easy, especially for people who have already been doing this work. They're, as you said, so ready. It's like they're primed. They're just waiting. It's almost as if their energy, the energetic grid and their blueprint is just begging for this.
Mm-hmm.
And so even with the amount of energy exchange that's happening and the activations and the attunements, it's almost as if it's like a breath of fresh air as they move into the energy. So yeah, there's some clearing, there might be some uncomfortableness, but truly as we're holding that space for them energetically and making sure they're kind of staying in spot, yeah, it is nurturing and reassuring because someone else, like you said, is holding that space. I'm going in and clearing and helping to release and shed off that old stuff, because that's, I think, what's hard when you're doing it on your own, is that you have to attend to your energy and you have to be doing that energetic hygiene. And I think that's where a lot of people end up, the energy restagnates or
Right.
the cord kind of comes back. And so it's not as easy for them to get balanced and to continue on that line.
Mm-hmm.
But with especially two people holding space for that, it just makes it that much easier and it makes it quicker. You begin to see the shifts so much faster. The client that we had worked with, she began to see changes within just a couple of weeks. And then by the end of the process, it seemed as if she had literally, like we're talking about, opened up a whole new awareness and new aspect of herself and was ready to make those changes, to take the steps that she had already known she was supposed to,
Mm-hmm.
but she just didn't really understand why. And she was still resisting them.
Yeah.
And what we were able to do was say, no, like, this is why you're resisting. So let's stop doing that. This is what you're intended to do. And once you let go of this thing you're resisting, all of the things that your soul knows it's supposed to have can begin to be delivered.
Right. Right.
But it's as though, like you said, that overlay, they're hiding under that overlay. So the energy that you're wanting to come in can't, because it
Yes.
can't find you. It can't
Exactly.
see you.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like your blueprint, the overlay that you have stolen from other people, essentially. It's not yours.
Right.
And this energy that you're trying to bring into it, it's hitting somebody else's stuff first.
Right.
And this other person might not be doing the work, right?
Right.
And if they are, they get it first.
Yep.
Right? And then so by the
Yes.
time they're done, which could take who knows how long, by the time it gets
Right.
to you, you're like, what's left? Like, I need more. I need more again, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
what I love about working with you in particular about this is that you really realize that the gentler you are, the kinder you are to yourself throughout this process,
Mhm.
the quicker it moves.
Yes.
because I tend to be very direct. And I do my best to be very kind with you when I tell it to you, but this
Mhm.
is what this is, and this is how we move through it, and XYZ. And sometimes it can feel like a lot. It can feel like a lot
Right.
all at once. And but when we're working together and you're working behind the scenes like energetically like okay, this can go here, it can be released whenever it needs to
Mhm.
be. It's so much it is so much more gentle. And then there are things that you do in between sessions with us that help
Yes.
integrate it and make it soft. And I think that that's probably like the biggest impact of this work is once you get to the other side of it is you're like that was challenging, but not
Mhm.
necessarily harrowing. You know,
Yes. I
and
love that. Challenging,
yeah,
not harrowing.
yeah,
Hmm.
because we can do hard things, right?
Yes.
In order to heal your trauma, you don't have to create more trauma.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. And I think that's why I love timeline healing.
mm-hmm.
Because it has allowed me to, yes, uncover and work with a lot of my own personal trauma without feeling as though I have to pull back the scab and look at the wound again and see what's underneath here. It's more like taking a magnifying glass and just like looking at it under a microscope
Mm-hmm.
at its very most essence of it and saying, oh, I see what that is. Let me go over here and find the solve for that and
Yeah,
put it on there.
yeah.
And then it heals.
One of the biggest things that I have learned through timeline healing and with teachers that I've worked with is allowing the experience to be as big as it possibly can feel within you and to just let yourself feel it without attaching
Yes.
story to it. You
Mm-hmm.
don't need to analyze it. It just
Yep.
is a feeling that you had felt before and couldn't let
Mm-hmm.
go of, and that's why you're
Yeah.
feeling it now. And it
Yep.
doesn't matter why.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. Eventually it will
Absolutely.
leave. And then after
Yes.
it leaves, you're going to be like, oh, I didn't even need that. If I had
Mm-hmm.
attached more story to it, I'd still have it. And I didn't need it in the
Yes.
first place. I was wrong
Mm-hmm.
about it to begin with, right?
Yep.
But being with that feeling, that terror, that disgust, the panic, the whatever it is that you're feeling, the fear, like that's so hard when you don't have
Yeah.
support in your life already for it.
Correct.
And that's sort of what we're trying to offer here. Like we're trying to help you do it, but also we're offering the support that maybe you wouldn't have
Correct.
otherwise. Yeah.
Well, and I think for me, the way I always picture that is it gets sticky, right? The
Yeah.
feelings can get sticky. And I think that's the part that creates the hesitancy to do this type of deep work until I'm ready. I'll do it when I'm ready. I know there's something
Yeah.
there, but I'll just wait till the right time to do
Yes.
this.
I hate
Right
that.
now is the right time. And
Yes.
having people who are checking into your energetic field are just checking in with you. Hey, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Let me help clear you, give you a little boost. That helps you to not get stuck.
Yeah.
It is the lifeline that says, nope, I'm right here. It's okay if you need to feel this. I'm going to hear you. I'm going to listen with you. I'm going to let you experience this. I'm going to let you feel your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to offer my hand so you don't get stuck in them.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to show you and I'm going to help clean you up
Yeah.
so that you don't have to continue to be in there. That's the important part, is allowing it to move through. And in regards to what you were saying about not attaching,
Mm-hmm.
if we're not attaching to the story, if we're not allowing ourselves to do that, then energetically, we're not giving density to the energy.
Mm-hmm.
When you're just allowing the feelings to move through your emotional body, it moves like fog and it just shifts and it moves and it clears and it goes.
Yeah.
When you sit with something and you start to attach ideas and you create these stories, it actually begins to solidify and it begins to look more like tar and it begins to stick to you.
That's when it
So
becomes yours.
that is when
Now
it
you're putting
becomes
yourself
yours.
into it.
You're creating a cord to it and then you energize it and give it more density.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you can just allow it to come up and move away, it goes very easily. As a side note, that's what people are talking about when they say don't attach to your emotions. They're saying don't create a cord to this emotion
Mm-hmm.
because then you're pulling it into you.
Yeah.
Versus if you just allow it to be and move, you're literally not attaching to it. It doesn't have anywhere to go
Yeah.
but out.
Yeah. No, for real. Because the emotion, sometimes it's hard to figure out what it's trying to tell you when you're
Yeah,
feeling something so overwhelming and strong, right? So
correct.
the brain, in its desperate rush to save you, really
Hmm.
goes, it's because of this. Never do this
Right.
again. This was
Yes.
awful.
Yes.
Doesn't this suck? God. And so that is probably not even why you're feeling it. And that's
Right.
probably not either the cause nor the effect. It's
Hmm.
just what your brain was trying to save you from, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And so it's okay to just be in the feeling. And then
Yeah.
afterwards, once the fog has lifted and you can see again, right? You'll be like,
Yes.
oh, okay. That was why.
Yes.
That was why.
And that is why hindsight is 2020, folks, because the fog clears and you're able to see more clearly. It reminds me of like when you get hungry and you get hangry and you're like,
Yeah.
ah, and everything in the world seems terrible. Everything is so bad and you can't stand the sound of people being, and the lights are loud. And then you eat something and you're like, oh, no, actually, everything is totally great.
Yeah.
It's because what you just said, like your brain went into, oh my God, we must like conquer, we must find, we must kill something in order to
Mhm.
nourish. We're in danger,
Yes.
danger, danger. And then you feed your body and it goes, oh, yeah, no, we're fine. We're not dying. We're good.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah.
Just kidding.
Well, that's the thing, right? There's always this urge to have an immediate understanding of what's going on.
Yeah,
And
right.
that I think is a very it's a trauma response to feeling unsafe.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
it takes a minute to just maybe trust your safety when you're in a safe space. And
correct.
which, at least in my experience, is when traumatic emotions pop back up, because
Mm.
now like you're relaxed enough and now the emotions are like, okay, now we must be felt, and then it comes through. And so when
Mhm.
you're already in like a safe environment and you suddenly start feeling not safe, there's
Right.
even almost a more to be like, why, what's happening, what's going on, like it's a meteor, right? It's coming, it's hitting, and
Right.
it's hard to detach from the resonance of it, because
Hmm.
you think, because I'm feeling it now, it must be attached to something that is immediately happening in my surroundings.
Right. Hmm.
Oftentimes that's not the case.
Correct.
And particularly in a moment where you are safe and you're feeling something like this, you're not going to understand immediately why it's happening. If
Hmm.
someone's coming at you with a machete, you're going to understand why it's happening, right? You're
Right.
going to
Yeah.
immediately react to what it is. But even within that, there are deeper layers as to why you might be afraid. Because if you
Hmm.
feel very confident that you can take a man with a machete, then you're not going to be afraid, right? But there are many
Correct.
layers to that. Maybe
Yeah.
you're afraid of men. Maybe there's something with weapons, and there are so many
Mm.
levels and layers, and you're not. Your conscious mind is not going to get all of them in
No.
that moment it's happening. And then so
Yeah.
later, your brain is going to try and unpack that and figure out. And as it moves through your energy field in particular, your mental body, your energy body, when it gets to the physical body, it's so dense that there's just no understanding. You just have to let
Mm.
it go at that
Yeah.
point. You just have to let it move through the physical body and be like, I'm sorry it got here. I'm sorry it
Hmm.
got to this point where I had to experience it physically before I paid attention to it.
Right.
And apologize to yourself. It's the Ho'oponopono, I think, method,
Yes.
which is so
Hmm.
powerful, where it's like, I am sorry.
Yeah.
Please forgive me. I dropped the ball. I love
Yeah.
you. I'll pay attention right now. I've got you
Hmm.
right now. And that's also more timeline work, because you're like, that
It is.
me of like even 30 seconds ago needed this right now.
Exactly.
It's possible to do, particularly with training, which also I think is probably what this program would offer. It's a little bit of training, it's a little bit of
Hmm.
insight on how I can deal with this and I can be gentle with
Absolutely.
myself. Because, I mean, we're human. It's very traumatic to be
Hmm.
human right now, particularly,
It can be. Yes.
yeah. And on this planet, it's hard to be a human. And so we'll move through this deep timeline issue with you, but you may come up against more. You may develop
Hmm.
more, because you're human and we all
Right.
are, and mistakes happen. And sometimes we don't have that insight. But having the
Yeah.
experience of having gone through it And what did I need
Mhm.
before? What worked before? What
Right.
could I use now? What could I apply now?
Mhm.
It's a healing program, but also I think it's a little bit of training.
Yeah, and coaching definitely
Yeah.
to know how to move through this type of deep energetic work. What kind of things do you need? And I think to speak back to like the way you talked about grounding and integrating it, the coaching that we're doing, it isn't just healing sessions. It's here are some reflections. Here are things that are specifically going to help you with this root issue.
Yeah.
These are the things that you need to look at and begin to do in your daily life. Here are some practices,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not only just the energetics, it's not only just you doing the Akashic and the blueprint and us releasing timelines and clearing those. It's also the channeling. It is the divine wisdom that comes down that says, not only is this why this is happening, not only are we going to help clear it and move it in this way, these are the things that you need to begin to do in your life to move out of this loop in a very real way, in a very like, here's your homework,
Mm-hmm.
do these things. And then we continue to check on that and say, hey, are you doing those things? This
Yeah.
is the work that you have to do. So how are you showing up for yourself in your daily life
Yeah.
that is going to reinforce and integrate this work that we're doing together?
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about clearing your field of resonance, which is like what we're doing,
Yeah.
it gets down to what am I vibing at, for
Mhm.
lack of a better term? What's my
Yeah.
resonance? Am I resonating with
Yeah.
myself?
Right. And
Is
I
it?
think it's that physical energy, right? Because if you have been working with or have this overlay for so long,
Mhm.
that means that your physical actions, the actions that you take, are what's going to help ground and integrate this. Using your voice, do you need to begin to stand up for yourself? Are there conversations that you need to happen with people in your family or with your boss or with your significant other or with yourself? Let's
Mhm.
not discount needing to just talk to yourself,
Yeah.
perhaps in a more kind way. And that's where that integration and that grounding happens. And that's the coaching part of this. I think that it's a healing program and it's also coaching. And like you said, training. Here are the steps that we are going through with you.
Mhm.
And then you can take this information and begin to do this for yourself as well, especially with the type of practitioners who are going to be interested in this. Like you said, they're probably people who have already maybe done some timeline healing on themselves,
Yeah.
or they have an advanced energetic and spiritual practice that they do. It's just they're too close to this particular issue.
Yeah. And it's always the issue that we're closest to that is the most ready to be let go of.
Absolutely. I agree.
Well, we should probably end it here so that we don't
I think so.
talk about everything all at once.
I agree.
But yeah, we will be back with another episode. Next week is when we'll put it
Yes.
out and we'll go even further into this. I can't remember exactly what we had decided to talk about, but you'll see us again. And I think on the third episode, we're going to do our best to go live so that maybe we can take any questions that anyone might have. And then on top of that, we'll just talk some more.
Yes, I'm really excited for that. You know, I love being live and answering people's questions. And so, yes, I'm excited for that. And we will see you guys next time.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys. Bye.
Bye.